Hello, everyone. My name is Cynthia Wins, and I am your host for this episode of SLB New Energy Conversations. Miles below the surface, there's a clean source of energy that offers a cleaner alternative to today's energy resources and is among the most promising renewable energy resources of the future. The power beneath our feet is called geothermal natural heat stored deep within the earth. It is clean, constant, virtually available everywhere once the next generation of technology is scaled globally. And in today's episode, we will delve into this clean energy source and geothermal technologies that will allow us to access untapped resources and ensure projects are economically viable. Joining us today with his expertise, Benoit Deville, Tech Development Director, Geothermal, SLB New Energy. Benoit, welcome. So glad you are with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here.
Yes, absolutely. So I guess a good place to start is with just geothermal energy. Tell us what it is.
Yeah, so geothermal energy is basically the heat that you recover at Earth's crust. So the Earth's crust is not much, right? On Earth, it's only less than 1% of the volume of the our globe. But beneath that, there's a lot happening, right? And so in the mantle and in the core, it's burning hot. It's close to 2,000 Fahrenheit at the Earth's crust boundaries. And in the center of the core, it's 10,000 Fahrenheit. And you have elements that continue to decay. And all that heat is being brought to surface. It amounts to 20 billion years of today's consumption. So literally, you have more energy under the Earth's surface that we will ever use.
And so how is it extracted when you've got that much energy under the earth? And I guess, what is its weight in the energy mix?
Yeah. So there's two types of geothermal. It's shallow geothermal is the one that you can see in your home. So basically, you bury sub pipe under the ground, you circulate water, and it's going to get heat or cooling, right? So that's your heat or cooling for your home or small buildings. But the big part of geothermal, the one we're interested in, is deep geothermal. In that case, you're going to drill, very deep and try to get water and steam out of the ground, right? So that geothermal is actually hydrothermal. We are not taking it from the ground directly. We're taking the water or the steam that is already hot at depth. And so there's two types of application. One is for direct use, heating, and the second one is for power, right? And so for the district heating, typically you need 140 Fahrenheit water, right? So not really hot. And you can find that in many sedimentary aquifers. But you need very high permeability because you need very high flow, right? To extract the heat, you need very high flow of water, right? The second one, the power, you need much higher temperature. So minimum 300 Fahrenheit, but it can reach between 400 and 600 Fahrenheit typically, right? And so you're going to extract that heat typically just in some specific area because where you can find water and steam so hot under the ground is only in very specific place. So close to tectonic plate boundaries. You have heard maybe of the Ring of Fire.
Ring of Fire.
Yeah, absolutely right. And so California as well is there, right? It's close to tectonic plate boundary or volcanoes. So that's actually the limiting factor of geothermal, right? Is today you can extract those type of water and steam only in very specific place, right? And so that limits its utilization. And it's why today geothermal energy is only less than 1% of the energy mix.
And I was going to ask, if it's so limited and I guess it requires complex engineering, how can you make geothermal energy a more viable choice? How do we do that?
Well, that's a great question, and that's why we're here, right?
That's right.
And so
that's why you're here.
Yeah, that's why I'm here. Yeah, absolutely. And so that's the story of next generation geothermal, right?
Sure.
The promise of next generation geothermal is you don't need to have water or steam. You're just going to extract heat from the ground. Right? And so now if you look at the potential, it's humongous, right? We go back at what I said in the, when I answered the first question, the potential is virtually infinite, right?
Sure.
And so the Department of Energy estimate that potential of commercially viable resources of geothermal, next generation geothermal in US is about 5.5 terawatt, right? So for people who don't really understand, it's 10 times the average consumption of US, right? So it would basically could replace all the source of energy in US. And not only that, right, but DOE is very ambitious about next generation geothermal, right? So last year, they released a report called DOE Earthshot Report, and they predicted that the capacity installed by 2050 would be 90 gigawatts. So just to give an order of magnitude, it's 20 times of what is installed today in geothermal energy. And not only that, but this year they released the liftoff report. And in the liftoff report, they forecasted that it's going to be 135 gigawatts. So they keep on increasing that, right? And actually, geothermal is one of the rare renewable energy that despite everything that is happening, right, and we see that it's growing a bit slower, that's the only one where people are forecasting the growth is actually going to be faster, right? And
so if the reports are predicting it and everybody's and I hear your excitement about it, like, why hasn't it been done before?
Well, because it's not that easy, right? And that's the problem of that. The rock is a very bad heat conductor. Okay, and so that's very good for us because when we walk on the ground, we don't burn our feet, right?
Sure.
It's as simple as that. We could not live on the surface of Earth if the rock was a good thermal conductor. But the bad thing about that is now extracting heat from the ground is very complex because as soon as you tap it, it basically cools down, right? So if you say, I'm just going to drill a well, reach hot temperature and circulate water, that rock will cool down instantly. Not instantly, but very fast. And it will take forever to recover. And so what you need to do, right, you need to make a massive heat exchanger with the rock, right? Think about, those cast iron radiator that your parents had in their home, right? You need to make that, but like 1,000 times bigger, okay? You're talking about, typically a kilometer cube of rock at 450 F will provide between 5 and 10 megawatt, which is, more or less what you get from a geothermal well. Right.
So is that the only process with which to extract it, or are there two different processes?
Well, so that's the process at large is to make that heat exchanger, but now there's two technologies that are competing,
what are
right?
those?
And those two technologies one is called enhanced geothermal system or EGS,
right,
commonly known. And you're going to frag that heat exchanger, fracture that heat exchanger, right? So basically you drill well, you create multiple fracture, and you see those fracture look a heat exchanger, right? Like a radiator. And you circulate water in the injector, it gets heated in contact to the rock, and it gets produced back through the producer, right? And that's how it works. So that's EGS.
That's EGS.
And the second one is called AGS, or Advanced Geothermal System. Don't ask me why they call them like that. It's still a mystery to me, but it's how it's called, right? And here you drill the heat exchanger, right? So you make the same thing. You make multiple passes in the rock, but you drill them. And so to give an order of magnitude, you need to drill between 150,000 to 250,000 feet of drilling lengths to extract the same amount of heat, right? And get the 5 to 10 megawatt electricity production, right? In the same type of temperature rock.
So which one's best?
Oh, well, I think, we tend to be agnostic at SLB on that.
We're in the middle. They're both good, but
exactly.
Well, tell me the pros and cons of each.
Yeah, absolutely. So, enhanced geothermal system is you have less drilling to do, right? And that's the big advantage. But the disadvantage of that is you have to create hydraulic fracture, right? And so those hydraulic fracture in the rock, it means, you don't completely control the permeability of each of the fracture. And if you have one fracture that conducts, more water than the other, it will cool down your reservoir. If you have a fracture that goes elsewhere, you're going to just lose that water, right? So that's a problem. You're going to have mineral scaling, right? Mineralization, because you're going to dissolve the minerals of the rock, and it's going to create mineralization in your pipe. So that's the complex part. The good part is the cost, right? Because today, at the velocity at which they drill the well in Utah, there's lots of pilot now, they're actually very close to be cost competitive to conventional geothermal. So they're already getting there.
Cost competitive enough to make it fully commercial?
Very
Are we
close.
there? Really?
Very close for the cost, right? Now the big question mark will be, can we maintain that radiator or heat exchanger for 25 years? And that is still a big question mark, right? In fact, in the pilot, they're losing water. So we're going to have to see a way that we can make that heat exchanger without losing water.
Okay, so talk to me about the advancements to make it fully commercial, to build the sustainability. What do the advancements look like to make EGS commercial?
Yeah. So the good thing is, we have lots of those tools in our toolkit, right?
Okay.
Because in oil and gas, we're doing fracturing of rock, we're doing drilling and so on. But that being said, for geothermal and next generation geothermal, there's new things, right? There are things that needs to be tailored. Of course, the temperature is much higher, the rock is much harder, that heat exchanger needs to be perfect. When in shale oil and gas, it doesn't matter as much. You can't lose water, and so on and so forth. And so first, drilling. Drilling, we need to drill fast in granitoid rock, right? And when you think granitoid rock, it may not talk to you, but your countertop that you have in your kitchen, it's more or less that, right? So extremely hard. But the good thing is we see that we're already going pretty fast, right? The wells, the first well we are drilling in about 70 days, and now they constantly drill in 20 days. And I can already tell you, next year we're going to be able to drill them most probably in 15 days. So I think we're getting there in terms of achievement. Now the fracturing of the reservoir, right? You need to map the subsurface to avoid those big fault and fracture that's going to basically destroy your heat exchanger, right? You need to model it, how you're going to do the drilling, how you're going to do the fracturing, to properly place the well and create the fracture network. We have all the tools. We need to upgrade them. For instance, our rock model don't have temperature-related properties, so we have to upgrade that. But we're getting there, right? And last but not least, we're going to have to produce for 25 years. In oil and gas, shale oil and gas, you produce a few years and you're good with that. Here, for 25 years, it needs to produce exactly the same. And there's going to be things happening to those fractures. They may open, they may close, you may have mineralization. And so we're going to need monitoring and control solutions. But we have those in our portfolio. The thing is they need to work at high temperature and for those specific rock. Mm-hmm. But we're going to get there, right? Have absolutely no doubt that we're going to, beat all the challenges of EGS. The question is not if, the question is when.
And speaking of when, it almost sounds like we're going to call it NextGen geothermal, but it almost sounds like we need it now. So the question is, how do you accelerate it, and what would you say is needed to accelerate it so that we see that NextGen now?
More pilot, right? You learn from doing, right?
Okay.
And so we need more pilot project. And so DOE can help here. They're helping. There's new project coming, but the Department of Energy helping us, right, will be great. The second thing is those pilot projects would be better if they're led with, leading technology company, right? I'm thinking, of course, about SLB, right? But it could be other, right? And we see a lot of value of partnering with end customer, right? We need to start to have end customer going with us in some of those projects, right? So it could be data center, but it can be power providers, it can be utility company. They need to be part of that. The second thing is policies. Right? For instance, permitting is more complex for geothermal than it is for oil and gas. It does not make sense. The good thing is already this year, 5 bills were proposed to actually accelerate the permitting for geothermal. So there is tailwind on the policy side. Right? And that's about it, right? The reality is everything else will come together, right? We need to get all the customer on board, right? The thing that we see today with utility company is, they've been burning gas and fuel, and the subsurface for them is a little bit scary. And so we have to give them that confidence. We have to show them that with our competency, the risk is not so high, right? Particularly on next generation geothermal. But to me, I think we have all the ingredients to make it happen, right? We just need to go and do it, right?
Yes, we need to link the demand with the offer.
Yeah.
So, and it sounds like they've been doing what they've been doing for so long, and you guys bring the education forward to then help them come along forward as well. So, okay, so we've accelerated the development of NextGen geothermal. If you were going to give kind of a word of advice, if you're casting vision for the future of geothermal for our listeners, what word of advice or what word of wisdom would you give for the future?
Well, I think, that's the promise of geothermal anywhere. The good thing about geothermal, you mentioned it in your introduction. It's clean, it's firm, it means you have power all the time. It's not like solar panel or wind. If you have no wind, you have no power on a wind turbine. If you have no sun, you have no electricity on a solar panel. Geothermal energy produces all the time, right? And so that's one of the only, truly clean energy that produces all the time. So the potential is humongous. It's clean, it's firm, it's low footprint, it's low emissions, right? So, everything is there. Now it's complex, right? And for utility company, it's still a bit scary. But what I think is company like us, if there's a push from DOE, if we partner together with utility, with commercials, with all that to make it happen, I'm extremely confident we're gonna get there. And at SLB, we're committed for that. We are developing the technology already to make it happen. And we are not talking in 5 or 10 years.
So when the sun is not shining and the wind is not blowing, geothermal is still there, right?
Absolutely. That's what it is.
How did you get connected to geothermal? What were you before, and why do you have the passion that you have for this?
Well, I have passion for techniques, but Yeah, my background is oil and gas.
Okay.
And so the reality is the first time I touched geothermal was actually in my previous job in oil and gas. We developed artificial lift pump, right, to pump the water
Sure.
at higher flow in the ground. And actually connected first with Geothermex, which is our geothermal consulting group in SLB. And
Did you actually concept this and bring it to them?
The pump, yes. I mean, they had the idea to say we need to develop a high temperature pump, but me and my team, right, our team, we developed the high temperature pump.
Come on.
Yeah.
Benoit fist bump.
Yeah.
Okay, carry on.
And so it's actually a huge success, right? We've installed, I think, close to 30 in Turkey. We've installed 4 in US, and it's coming now in Philippines and Indonesia. And so that created a lot of interest to me, and I started to say, oh, you know what? The next job I'd like to be in new energy and geothermal. And then I've been lucky, I don't know. People have been they've been hearing my requests, right? And I've joined the geothermal team in Scalable New Energy.
So that's exciting. Your first statement was kind of a little overwhelming when you said when you go so deep and there's so much heat and it's eternal, like it's never going to run out.
Yes.
Was that shocking? Have we known these things? And I'm still unclear as to why we just haven't had the knowledge of how to tap into it, correct?
Yeah, that's still the case, right? The truth, right? If you look at geothermal energy, it's been, used, since the Roman time. You remember the hot bath that you had in the Roman time?
Yeah, of course.
It was that water that was coming from the ground.
Ah.
The reality is, again, is that rock is very low conductivity, right? And so unless you have water that is already hot, if you circulate water, it cools down, right? So that next generation geothermal is what was missing. A bit like shale oil and gas. So, those shale oil and gas for 20, 30 years, people say it's there, but there's nothing we can do about that.
Sure.
Right? It's tight, we can't produce them, forget about it. It will never be commercially viable. And the reality is, at some point they tried, right? And it worked. And I think it's the same thing for geothermal, right? It's making that step, having the right level of investment, the right level of interest, and we'll make it happen.
Amazing. It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing. I have 1,000 more questions, but I'm going to stop there. Yeah. If you were telling college graduates, coming out, going into the field, and they're coming out of an old mindset, just kind of how we've always done things, if you were going back to yourself as a college senior, what would you say to yourself in this new endeavor, knowing what you know now? What would you say to a college senior coming out?
Yeah, generally speaking, is don't listen to the comment to say, we've tried, we've done it, it will never work, because the reality is we prove all the time that we can make it work, right? And so it's just take, energy, brain power, and money and investment for sure, right? and technology leadership, right? And at SLB, we're really committed to that.
And is there a big education component to this? Do you find yourself, when you talk about the people that have done it the same way, how are you educating them that this is definitely the new way to go? I guess, and what's the biggest hurdle there? Just
for the customer, you mean many of those customers that goes there? To be honest with you, yes, geothermal for them looks scary in the sense that you have to drill well.
But why are they scared? Because they have to drill?
Because it's really easy to think about burning oil and gas. It's coming to them, right? The only thing they have to think is the surface plant. Now you have to develop a resource. You have to get yourself the resource. And for oil and gas, you have to buy oil and gas in the market. Here, you have to extract it from the ground. You have to do it yourself. What the oil and gas company were doing, now it's you doing it. So what we're telling them, no, it's not you, it's us, right? So we're gonna do it for them. And that's the part, where we're, basically bridging that plug, right? Or bridging that gap, is we're bringing that knowledge to them. We make it, certain for them.
Yeah. Make it easy for them. We are your resource.
Yes.
Amazing. And are they coming around? Do you see success with them coming around?
We see a lot of interest, right, today. There's still a lot of question mark, because the type of profile of investment is very different from gas plant, gas power plant or coal power plant. On a gas or coal power plant, the upfront investment when you build the plant is not that big. But the OPEX, the operational expense, because you buy oil and gas from the market or coal, is very big. In geothermal, it's the opposite, right? 2/3 of the investment is year one, right? Year one. When you actually make the plant and you drill all the wells and everything. And so all that level of risk and that upfront investment is still something that they need to wrap their head around, right? But it's what we're discussing with them. It's what we're making some model with them where we partner and we basically helping them to make it more palatable.
Sure.
Yeah.
And how quickly can they see an ROI on that initial investment?
So it depends, but on next generation geothermal, it could be relatively quick, right? It could be less than 10 years.
Yeah.
And after, it can produce, like I said, for 25,
Eternity,
30 years, for very long, right? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Your expertise on how to make geothermal systems or EGS as an accessible solution is amazing. And thank you so much for listening to this episode of SLB New Energy Conversations.